Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mike Lenz VO podcast. My name is Mike Lenz. I'm an entrepreneur and a full-time professional voice actor and audiobook narrator. My goal is to share with you stories from some of the most amazing and inspiring people from all areas of the voiceover industry to help you achieve your dream of becoming a professional voice actor. So please leave me a review over on iTunes and join us over on the web at mikelenzvopodcast.com to be notified of each episode when it comes out. Now, get ready to be inspired. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Mike Lenz VO podcast. So glad you're here with me today. Today's episode is sponsored by VO Tech Guru, where you can access the Audition Ready online course, and you can use ML20 to get 20% off of Tim Tippett's course. We are also sponsored by VoiceZam, and you can go over to voicezam.com and sign up for the Mike Lenz special promotion, which is a 30-day free trial. Regularly, it's 15 days, so you get an additional 15 days of a free trial with VoiceZam over at voicezam.com. You can access both of those sites over at the Mike Lenz VO podcast website. About halfway down the page, go to the sponsor links and we'll take you to both of them. Okay, so check them both out. You'll be glad you did. On today's episode, I had a great time sitting down with my good friend Mike Cooper. Mike Cooper is a British voice talent who swapped big city life in London for log cabin life in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. Mike is recognizable for his many years on air with the BBC World Service and as the narrator of countless television documentaries and a growing library of audiobooks. When he's not in the home studio, you'll find him enjoying hobby farm life and tending to some charming pet goats, 3 horses, including a delightful mini horse called Annie, and a growing hobby farm menagerie. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Mike Cooper. Hey, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you and I have been talking for years, and we've talked about you bringing on the podcast, and I'm glad that we finally made it happen. I'm not releasing episodes as frequently as I was before, but I'm glad we finally got you on because I think you have a really good story to tell, and I think your journey is going to help a lot of my listeners, the experiences that you've had. So I'm glad we finally got together.
Thanks. I hope they find it interesting. It's been an unusual route to get here in some respects, but here we are.
I know. I love it, man. Everybody's journey is a little bit different, and that's the beauty of it, because if it was all the same, it would get a little bit boring. But the fact that we all have different journeys is just fascinating to me. So this is a good place to start. Why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about your journey, how you came into VO. Obviously, you've got your accent that people will recognize, and you're coming to us from Asheville, North Carolina. So how did that all happen, and how did you get into VO?
Well, it's probably obvious to anybody listening that this isn't where I'm from originally. I've been in America. Well, next week, we're recording this just before Thanksgiving. So this week is 8 years since my husband and I arrived in America. He's American. He came to live with me in London for about 4.5 years, and then we decided we would move back here. But I came into voiceover. I think people who come into voiceover generally come in from one of two areas. They either come from an acting background and they enjoy doing all the voices and casting the characters and stuff, and they want to do that, or they're like me and they come from a broadcast background. I was that kid that was fascinated by the voices he heard coming out of the radio and TV. And when I was knee high, I just said to my mum and dad, that's what I want to do. And I think they thought I was nuts, because I came from a very, very blue collar family. Nobody in my family was anything to do with the media or radio or TV. So I think they thought it was a pipe dream. And I pursued it. And a couple of days after my 17th birthday, I ended up going to work for the BBC. And I stayed in media in the UK for about 25 years. And then somewhere in the middle of all that, I was working as a news director, so directing TV news programs for rolling news channels. And I walked into our little basement bedroom one day, and it had a clothes closet, a walk-in closet off it. And I walked in, and I just had this flash of inspiration, and I thought, it sounds really good in here. This would make a great voiceover booth. I wonder if you can do voiceovers from home. And this was 2007, and I went online and checked it out, and it turned out you could do voiceovers from home.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't as big as it is now, but Voice 123 had started. Voices.com hadn't started yet. Badalgo was a way off. But there were people making money doing voiceovers from home, so I became one of them. And in the space of about 6 months, it turned into my full-time business, and then, as so often happens, fate twisted my arm, and a lot of the directing work that I was doing dried up virtually overnight, and I plunged headlong into voiceover. So here we are.
And it's fascinating that when things kind of open up for you, you realize you're kind of going along in this journey. And I think you have to be open to it, right? So you had that germ of an idea in your mind so that when you came upon the closet, thought, I wonder if I can put a studio in here because I know, I got started back in '05 and and nobody had home recording studios.
No.
It was virtually non-existent. Everybody went into studios. And I remember there was talk about it. And I started thinking, yeah, I think I should invest in some home recording equipment because it seems like that makes a lot of sense. And, as it turns out, that was the path that
Yeah.
that voiceover was going to
Yeah, I
take. So
mean,
having that insight is pretty important.
back then, people in the UK anyway, prior to all of this, people had been like people who did commercial radio voiceovers, voicing commercials, would travel around the country. So
Sure.
there was a circuit of people that would drive around the UK. And they might be in London at a station on a Monday, and then they might go across to Bristol on a Tuesday. They might go to Manchester on a Thursday or whatever, and they'd trek around the country. So to avoid doing that, some of them had started putting in home studios and putting in ISDN lines. Remember those?
Hmm.
And that was how I got started. I remember the day when my ISDN line finally arrived, and it really felt like I'd made it, you know? It's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah.
I've got a special line now to do voiceovers. I must have arrived. And of course, the technology moves on, and now you look at you mention ISDN lines to people, and they look at you, and they don't know what you're talking about.
They
So the
don't.
technology is moving along all the while.
It is, and I remember interviewing Harlan Hogan, one of my first guests, years ago, and he was saying that in the early days here in the States, there was a very small group of people that were doing this VO, and they didn't really tell anybody about it because they
Yeah,
wanted to kind of keep all the business to themselves, right? So then when the home studio thing started to happen, that really did affect some of these folks because it really opened up the world of VO to pretty much anybody who could get themselves set up properly. And it was kind of the wild, wild west in the beginning, but
yeah, it was a blessing and a curse, wasn't it?
exactly.
Because on the one hand, it lowered the barrier to entry, which meant that it leveled the playing field and meant that anybody who really wanted to do it and was serious about it could do it. But it also opened the playing field to pretty much anybody who could afford a USB microphone. And I think
That's
what
right.
we've seen over the years since is every time the economy takes a hit, or there's something like, a pandemic or whatever, um, somebody latches onto the idea of you can make money in your pajamas doing voiceovers, and there's a flood of people into the market. It feels like it goes in cycles. It feels like it happens every 2 or 3 years at this point to me.
I would agree with that, and I think that ultimately it initially diluted the industry to a certain extent, and probably to some extent now it continues to dilute it. But I do also feel that the people that come into it for those reasons, they think they're going to make a lot of money in the beginning, and when they don't, I think they typically fall away. And the people that do end up sticking it out are the people that do commit themselves to
That's
spending the
right.
money to do the training, to do the coaching, to do the networking, to get their tech set up, and then those are the people that you and I know and associate with on a regular basis. So, yeah, you know, there wasn't the argument in relatively recent years, that the drive to the bottom, it was pushing down the price with Fiverr and all these things.
Yeah.
But I do think that the people in the know have begun to realize, look, that's never going to go away, but the quality does rise to the top.
Yeah.
And I think that that's been the case in this industry, as in most industries. Um, so tell me a little bit about what it was like when you decided I'm going to leave London. I'm going to head on to the States. Decided to you went from the big city to relatively small town, into the
Yeah.
nature of Asheville, North Carolina. How did that come about?
Well, it was a process. So my American husband, Mark, we met in America. I brought him over to London, and he said to me when he got there, "I can live in the big city. I can do big city, but I don't want to do it for more than a couple of years. I'm much happier in the country." So even before we left the UK, we'd been looking around places outside London, and we'd worked our way from Essex on the southeast coast all the way round to Devon on the southwest coast. And we'd almost bought a house, and the deal had fallen through. And then we found out that I could get Mark, or Mark could get me a green card to live in America. We'd been married about 4 years at that point. And so we went to the end of a very short line and had a green card in 3 months. Um, and we drew up a short list of places we might like to visit. Some of them were places he'd lived before, places like San Diego. We talked about about going for him. It would be back to Florida,
Hmm.
but he decided he was kind of done with that. We had places like Sedona, Arizona, and a few other places. But there was this place, Asheville, North Carolina, and he said, "How about Asheville, North Carolina?" And I said, "I have no idea what that means. I've never heard of the place." He said, "Check it out. It seems to be making a lot of lists of, places to do XYZ." And I looked at it and it looked cool. The restaurant scene was getting started and people were heading here from all over the place. So we came and checked it out for a week around my birthday in April 2014. And I Googled voiceovers in Asheville, North Carolina, and came up with a list of about 3 or 4 people. I wrote to them all and said, "Hey, we're going to be in town. Would you like to get together?" And one of them helped get together this group. And on my birthday, 7 different voiceovers, 6 of whom I'd never met before, all turned up for my birthday. And that was just one of a bunch of things that happened that week that just made us think, this is a cool town. We could live here. But yeah, it
Hmm.
was a big thing moving from a city of, well, London's 8 or 9 million people if you count the centre, but goes up to probably double that if you count Greater London. So
Hmm.
to move from that to a city that's maybe 85, 90,000 people and then go and stick yourselves up a mountain valley that's 15, 16 miles out of town from there, yeah, it's a bit of an adjustment. I wasn't sure how I'd do it, not being able to see my neighbours and stuff, but I have to tell you, you would have a job on your hands to try and get me back into a town or a city at this point. I love the country life.
Well, I've seen pictures, and you share them on social media. It's on your website. Just the picture from your front porch is just spectacular.
We live at the bottom of the biggest mountain in the area. I think I'm right in saying that the TV mast that's on the top of it
Yeah.
is the highest elevation above east of the Mississippi.
Mm.
So we're half a mile up. We're about 2,600 feet. The top of the mountain's about 5,800 feet, I think. And yeah, it's gorgeous. It changes all the time. So we sit right at the bottom of the mountain. We look out at the mountain, and from 1 hour to the next, it just changes constantly. The light
Sure.
changes, the vegetation changes from season to season. Sometimes it's snow capped or covered in frost. Yeah, it's a nice backdrop. I love sharing it. People seem to love looking at it.
And I think you had mentioned to me once when we were talking, one of our Zoom calls, and you were saying that, what was it about that you wanted to have a house where it felt like you were on vacation? What was that? The description that you gave?
Yeah. So my husband Mark is he's a human behavior specialist, but he's a great coach. And one of the things that he does with his clients is ask them to dream. Most people have never been given permission to dream or even think about what they want from their lives, but it's common practice for us. So we thought about it and we thought, well, what do we want to create here? And we came to the conclusion that if we could create a life that felt like being on vacation, that would be really nice. So we moved in, and it took us a couple of years, but then we started accumulating animals. And it's at this point turned into, I guess you'd call it a homestead type farm.
Mhm.
We started with some chickens and a couple of pet goats.
The
And
gateway drug
the
to,
gateway
to
animals,
full
yeah,
farming. Yep.
yeah. So all of our goats are named after soap characters, soap opera sitcom characters. Um, so we have. You'll be old enough, possibly, to remember this, being an American. So when our baby goats. Who were very sick when they got here, when they got better, and the girl, when the doe's eyes opened, she had these beautiful brown hazel eyes. And I said to Mark, we have to call her Hazel. And he said, well, if she's Hazel, then he has to be Mr. Baxter. Now, that's a reference that's lost on anybody who's not from here and not of the right generation. But these two were sitcom characters from the 60s, and I think it was a comic strip before that. We just
Mhm.
got 2 more. So the babies are called Joey and Chandler.
Oh, lovely. Friends from Friends.
Yeah.
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 A little more recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And then
great.
a couple of
That's
years ago,
great.
we started with horses. So now we have 3 horses, and that changes everything. You know, I never saw any of this in my future, Mike.
That's the beauty of it, though, isn't it?
Yeah, being open to the unexpected, being open to things that you don't necessarily think of yourself, but saying yes to life, I think, is what's really changed for me over the time since we've been here. I feel like there's a lot more opportunity to do things here. I don't feel so constrained in my life as I did when I lived in the middle of a big city like London.
Hmm.
So there's a freedom that comes from having a life like the one we've created here, and I really enjoy that.
Well, absolutely beautiful. All the pictures that I've seen, just wonderful. The I always remember I read somewhere a great quote. It was something about people should you should start asking yourself what if questions. So what if we could live anywhere? Where would we live? What if we could create a place that felt like we were always on vacation? What if, when you start asking yourself what if questions, then you, as you said, you give yourself permission to think about something that you might not otherwise think about. And I don't think we spend enough time asking those questions
Yeah,
of
I
ourselves
think
in
you're right.
general.
I think you're absolutely right.
So, but I'm glad you did because it certainly
Me
has led
too.
you guys on a wonderful journey. I've got a lot of other things I want to talk to you about.
Yeah,
I am
let's
going to
do
take
it.
a very short break for just a couple of minute break for some words from our sponsors, and then we'll be right on back here. So hang tight, everybody.
Bob Merkel here with a special offer for VoiceAm. Sign up for VoiceAm using promo code MikeLens and you'll get a 30-day free trial. VoiceAm's player is easy to customize and embed. Your buyers can play full demos or just the reads inside. Plus, both are downloadable, and you'll be presenting demos like a pro. Our players are designed to keep buyers listening, and that means you're getting heard and getting hired. Join the ZAM fam now and be sure to use the promo code MikeLens.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I am here with my friend and fellow voice artist Mike Cooper. Mike, we've been talking about your journey from London to Asheville, North Carolina, and talking about creating that life and that home that really you had dreamed of and allowing yourself to dream it. I also know that one of the things that you have created there is a pretty amazing studio. I think you had said your commute is now like 17 feet or 17
It's
yards.
17 yards. It's a
Um,
bit firm.
so, what was that process like? Because I've seen, again, on our Zoom calls, I've seen your studio and there's pictures on your website, but describe the process you went through to get to that place.
Well, there were a couple of factors to bear in mind, and one is that Mark, my husband, and I, we both work from home. So, in terms of getting a good studio, I wanted it not to be part of the house if we could avoid it. Aside from the fact that the house is pretty tiny anyway, it's a log cabin, and we're probably short of about 3 rooms that we need. So, what we decided to do was we had a double-story garage, and we decided we would partition off what turned into about an 8 by 11 room. So my studio is above the garage, but there's nobody down there most of the time. And it's separate from the house. So yeah, I have a 17-yard commute from the house to the studio. And it's a great sounding studio. They double walled it, and we put sound insulation in the walls. We got acoustic treatment inside. I made some acoustic panels, and then used some of the foam insulation and the bass traps that we brought with us from what I call Studio 2 in London. This is Studio 3. And it sounds really good. I have one problem with it, which is when the guys built it, they didn't quite understand what they were doing in terms of the isolating the room within the room. So they didn't sufficiently isolate it from the structure itself. So if we get things like heavy rain, I get a little bit of that drumming noise that comes down through the structure. But again, we were talking about technology before. One of the things that's changed in the time I've been here is I can now take out that kind of noise without anybody being any the wiser and never even know it
Mm.
was there. Yeah, I know we're always aiming for the best possible sound quality and whatever going in, but it's nice to know that you can deal with a little problem like that if you have one. And that was a real issue when I first started in here. I would have to, ridiculous as it sounds, having built a studio, I would still have to plan around the weather to some degree. And now I don't have to do that.
Right. Technology takes care of that
Yeah.
for you.
And the thing is, I call this Studio 3 because Studio 1 was the closet off the bedroom in the first house. Studio 2
Hmm.
was a spare room in the second house. And this is Studio 3. And each time you build a studio, you come up with things you want to do better or differently next time. So one of the things I've never been a big fan of like standalone booths. I get that they're a great solution for a lot of people, but coming from a radio background, I've always enjoyed having all the controls and stuff in front of me. So I
Hmm.
wanted to have a studio where I sat at the desk with all my controls, not in a separate room. I didn't. One of the things I did in one of my old studios was I had to keep going backwards and forwards from the microphone to my computer, and it was just annoying. So I didn't want to do that this time around. And the other thing I wanted was a breakout area so I could go and sit and work on my laptop and sit on a sofa. Um, so it's a nice, comfortable room. Mark is very jealous of it, calls it my cave, and it kind of is, really. I enjoy it out here. I'll come and sequester myself out here for hours at a time.
Oh, I can imagine seeing the pictures that it's more than a studio. It's a place where it's your place,
And I think that's
and
important.
I think it is
I've
too.
seen
Yeah.
yours, and it's we spend a long time in these places on our own. I think it's
Yes.
important that you have somewhere that's comfortable for you, that's at the right temperature. I like having plants in my studio. A bunch of people have been in and said, "Oh, plants! I never thought of that." But
Hmm.
it softens things, and it's nice to have natural things in here as well. I can't get any of our pets to stay in here, unfortunately.
That's probably okay.
Yeah.
Too distracting
They are a
for
little bit,
work.
but it's nice. But they're just not interested. We got a cat recently, and even she's not that interested in being in here. So it's just me and my plants and a few plushy toys.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. And when I was trying to decide what to do, I ended up making the same decision that you did. My studio was inside the house in the basement, but I did create the room within a room as opposed to getting an actual a booth
Hmm.
because I liked the idea. I'm about 4.5 by 10 feet here. It's not as large as your area, but for me, I have enough room where I can have a nice comfortable chair that I sit in if I'm prepping or just relaxing and reading, in my studio that I'm not in that I don't feel that crampedness of being inside
Yeah, it's just
the
nice to be able to get up
the
and move
studio
about.
brick, even though I know that there's value in that, and maybe at some point I would invest in one of those depending on where I was. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. It's just for my decision, I didn't wanna make my room smaller. I didn't wanna go smaller. I wanted to keep it the size that it was. And by double sheetrocking and putting in the soundproofing insulation, it has done a beautiful job with the acoustic treatment. Just so happy with the way it is. And I can sit here at my desk where I'm interviewing you, and this is the exact same place where I record because it's all one. It's
Mm.
all one and the same,
Yeah,
which
I
I
just
I,
like
I
having
enjoy as
space to
well.
move around, and
Yeah, I agree.
especially if you end up on a session where you're being directed remotely, and maybe there's a committee of people spread in different places, and they're all chatting away. It's just nice to be able to get up and stretch your legs, walk around a little bit, maybe clench your fists, grit your teeth as you hear the conversation going on at the other end or whatever. But it's nice not to just be hemmed in, and I
Hmm.
think there's a place for everything. And if you're limited on space and you're trying to get great sound quality, then a booth is absolutely the way to go.
Sure, sure.
It's not quite what I would choose. Or if I had one, I'd want it to be a big one, and they get very spendy.
Yeah. And it's an evolution, as you said. You went from Studio 1 to Studio 3, and maybe someday there'll be Studio 4.
Yes.
It's an
Yeah, and
evolution
I
that we
already
all
know
go
what I
through,
would
and
do differently in Studio 4.
yeah, do something with that roof.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So so tell me a little bit about, one of the things we have in common is the audiobook world.
Mm.
So, how did that was that part of the plan? Did that evolve naturally? How did you move over when you got here? And even before you got here, if you were doing audiobooks, how did you find that world?
I did not do audiobooks until I guess it's about 3 years ago now. Because, like a lot of voiceover people, who are charging voiceover rates and hourly rates in voiceover are maybe in the $300-400 range, plus usage and stuff if you're lucky. And I looked at audiobooks like most people and thought, well, why would you? Because you look at the amount of work that's involved in recording an audiobook, and it just doesn't look good on paper for a lot of people.
Sure, you're making less, taking more time to make less money. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah. And then an interesting thing happened. So I mentioned my husband Mark and the fact that he coaches people and he talks about human nature and intuition. And we have a mutual friend and former colleague of Mark's, a guy called William Whitecloud, who'd written a book that distilled all of his work of the last 20 years into one book and called it The Secrets of Natural Success. And I'd been reading this book on a trip to England. I was finishing it up on the plane on the way back. And I just got, again, this hit of intuition that said, I'd love to narrate this. I wonder if William has a narrator. Oh, I'm sure he does. Maybe he doesn't. But the thing was, the plane had in-flight messaging, so I was able to message him from the plane and say, "Just finished your book. It's great. I bet you have a narrator, but if not, would you consider me?" And he wrote back immediately and said, "I don't, and you're the perfect choice because you know the stuff anyway. Let's do it." So it was a baptism of fire. It was October 2019, and I decided I was going to get it finished by Christmas. And like a lot of people doing their first book, I decided I would record it, edit it, proof it, and
sure,
got to
sure.
the end of all
How
that.
long was it? How long was the book?
I think it came in about 4 or 5 hours in the end. Not a huge book,
Okay, not too bad.
but I got to the end of it and I thought, well, that was interesting. I quite enjoyed it. I don't think I would want to master and proof again. And I also realized it's probably best if you don't, if you can afford to have somebody else do it for you, because the more pairs of ears, the more likely mistakes are spotted. And in terms of editing, if you're doing voiceover, editing an audiobook's a huge undertaking. That's going to take a lot of your hours away. So
Sure
I
is.
did that first one and I thoroughly enjoyed it, put it to one side and thought no more of it. And then 3 months later, 4 months later, COVID. And all of my commercial, corporate, industrial work just came to a complete standstill. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, what about pulling on that thread of the audiobook thing again? And I thought about it, and I spent a weekend and went off and did a deep dive into the research, spent some time on Karen Collins's excellent Narrator's Roadmap website, looked at a
Mhm.
few YouTube videos, and also decided that if I was going to do it, I would prefer to do nonfiction rather than fiction. Because as I said at the beginning, I don't really come from an acting background. I'm not a man of a thousand voices. I enjoy explaining things. And I think I do a good job of explaining things. And I seem to have one of those voices that's calming and soothing, and people seem to understand what I'm saying, even if you know what it's like. Sometimes you don't really
Sure.
understand what you're reading, but if you can sound like you know what it
That's all
means,
we need to do.
that's
That's
all you
all we
need to
need to
get it
do.
over the line, right? So
Correct.
I decided I wanted to do nonfiction narration rather than fiction. And I thought, well, I can do most of it, but I'm sure there are things I'm missing. It's an arrogant man that walks into any new arena and thinks he knows it all. And I knew that I had some stuff that was transferable. I'd done a lot of documentary narration and long form narration of that type for broadcast. So I thought I could probably bring some of that across. But I found this guy who was the only guy I could find who was coaching nonfiction narration, called Sean Pratt, and signed up to work with him. Blasted my way through his course I'm not sure if it was record time, but I got through it pretty quickly. And from there, managed to springboard with the help of a couple of friends who were kind enough to make introductions on my behalf. Went straight into working with two or three publishers, and I've been working with them ever since. So it was my COVID pivot, and it's been very good to
Hmm.
me. And it's enabled me to do things like get healthcare, health coverage,
Sure.
which before was almost prohibitively expensive. So it's been very good to me, and I enjoy it. I love reading these books that come down the pipe. They're the kind of things that when I'm in a bookshop or in an airport, I always gravitate to the bookshelves. I always think, well, that's really interesting, but when would I find the time to read this? And now I get paid to do it, so it's a great outlet.
I say that every day when I come down to the studio. I'm like, wow, I get to do this and people pay me for it. This is pretty amazing. So still, after 15 years, I still pinch myself. It's a really nice way to make a living. And you and I have had many conversations about the audiobook world, and you touched on a couple of the reasons why it makes sense if long form is something that you can tolerate, and some people can't, and understanding that, it's a piece of the pie. It's part of what we do as voice actors. I do other things besides audiobooks, but I also narrate a lot of audiobooks because not only do I enjoy it, but I've been fortunate enough to get work with a lot of different publishers, and it's allowed me to have a base of audiobook work. As PJ Oakland always said, um, he's a great narrator and coach as well, and an actor actually, on film and stage and TV. And he said, the thing that I love about audiobooks in his particular situation is that I know I can work whenever I want. And if I get a gig that takes me to a set for a few months, I can let my publishers know that I'm going to kind of be out of the studio, and I'll let you know when I'm back. And when I come back, they're like, okay, they'll start sending me books again. Now, it takes a while to get to that point. Again, I don't want to be one of those people that people listening to this go, oh my gosh, it's so easy to be an audiobook narrator. I'm just going to go and, Mike Cooper and Mike Lenz just started working with publishers, and then this is so easy. It's not. We both
It's
know
not. And
that
I
it's
had
very
somebody else
difficult.
tell me when I was talking about getting into it, I had a couple of people tell me, you will need to do royalty share books, and you'll need to work through ACX, and you can probably look at doing, and depending on who I was talking to, it was 40 books, 50 books, 60 books, before publishers will be prepared to give you a chance and start sending you stuff. But right place, right time,
Yeah.
using the things that you have on hand to your advantage. I managed to do better than that for me. And a lot of people love
Mhm.
doing royalty share. I've my friend Hannibal Hills, who's another Brit, coincidentally, in North Carolina, does a lot of royalty share books. It has got really good at picking the ones that make money.
Mhm.
And, he sometimes gets a dud, but a lot of the time he's doing really well with that. So don't write off things like royalty share and working direct with authors. It's just for me, I preferred, because I think I was going to shoehorn audiobooks in around the other stuff. I was looking for something that, if possible, was just a cleaner production process. When you're working with a publisher, it tends to be that, because they say, here's a book, would you like it? Or you audition, whichever. And then they handle everything from there. You get a PDF, you record it, you send the audio back, and that's about it.
Right, and they send you a file with the pickups, and you send that back, and they take care of editing it and inserting it, and those proofers and editors are priceless in terms
Exactly.
of the work
Whereas
they
if you're
do.
working direct with an author or whatever, you're probably going to be finding an editor and a proofer, negotiating over a rate or whatever. And yeah,
Mhm.
for me, that wasn't quite the right fit. But again, as I heard you, I was listening to your interview with Anne Cloud, who's up the road from me, a
Yeah.
couple of days ago. And it's fascinating and it's very encouraging, the way that voiceover, audiobooks, we can make these careers fit us, and we can tailor make them to what we want to some degree. If you're prepared to put the time in and be good at what you're doing, you can usually tailor make your career to fit around whatever else you're doing. It's great.
And I think, the point that I make to people often is that, you know, in the beginning, you have to focus on the quality, and then the quantity will come. But if you don't focus on that quality first, it's gonna get very hard. It's gonna be very difficult to get to the quantity, because if you're not, uh, you know, capable of delivering the product that the client wants, then, your ability to get more work is gonna be limited.
Yeah,
So, you can't look at it as a get rich quick scheme. It has to be an investment of your time, your money, your effort, and there will be challenging times. And you have to have the ability, as you've said, to be able to pivot. But your talent, the quality that you created throughout your career, allowed you to make a pivot into audiobooks more quickly than somebody who was just starting out and had no experience in VO. So the quality allowed you to pivot into audiobooks more quickly than somebody else might, and
yeah.
that's
I
an
think I
important
think
point,
I
I
think
think.
that's yeah. That was very big for me. But my skill set doesn't lend it to a bunch of other things. So I think playing to your advantages, realizing what your advantages are, and then playing to them is incredibly important with this kind of career.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we never know what's around the corner,
No.
which is kind of exciting. That's kind of fun. What do you think's next for you? What's kind of on your to-do list for 2023?
Well,
Anything jump out?
I've been looking into the audio description world, actually.
Mhm.
So this was something it's been on my radar for about 2 or 3 years, but I never really knew how to get into it and approach it. And how many hours do you have in the day? So when things start to go quiet, and I've noticed things are a little quieter of late outside the audiobook world, I start looking around for, well, what might be the next thing? Um, a couple of years ago, I was looking at AI voicing. Could I license my voice as an AI voice? And in the end, again, I decided that wasn't quite the right fit for me. But audio description is a huge area that's growing at the moment, and I'm sure you know what it is. But in case anyone listening doesn't, audio description is kind of the audio equivalent of subtitles for people who are either blind or partially sighted. So there'll be in between the dialogue in the program, you'll hear an audio description voice that will then describe the action that's happening on the screen. So the dialogue ends, and you'll get Mike walks to the coffee machine. He sits down at the table. Jean walks in. She sits down too. That kind of thing. So you're
Mhm.
describing what's happening on screen for people who can't see for themselves. The interesting thing is there are different approaches to doing it. And some producers want to use AI voices on it. Amazon, for example, wants to move all of its stuff over to AI as soon as it can. But there's a lot of pushback on that from people in the blind and partially sighted community, because they turn around and they say, well, hang on a minute. We spend all day, every day, listening to synthetic voices on our screen readers, on our mobile phones, on ATMs and everywhere else. We don't want to come home and sit down to be entertained and hear another AI voice describing the action on the screen. So they
Mhm.
really want to hear natural voices doing audio description. And in the UK, this has been around a while longer. The regulation, I think, is a little tighter in the UK in terms of how much content has to be audio described and subtitled. I think we're catching up in America, and there's a lot of material out there. And it's one of those things, a little like audiobooks, where there's more content out there that needs audio description than there are people available to do it. So it
Sure.
looks like a good bet for work for a while. It's hugely variable in terms of rates. It's variable in terms of how you work with people and deliver that content. But one of our colleagues, Sophia Cruz, pulled it all together and put it into a very manageable introduction course. And I'm now working with her and creating a demo and so on. So there's always new stuff you can learn, and there are always new areas that you can get into if you want to, or if what you're doing isn't quite working for you.
Yeah, Sophia is wonderful. She was a guest on the podcast, and she's a font of information.
She is. We've worked together over the years on a few different things, and we stay in each other's orbit. So when I realised she was doing this, I was like, yeah, if Sophia's gone to the trouble to put all this together, I just
It's worth
take
it.
take my
Yeah,
money and tell me how it works.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's how I felt with Natasha Marchevka and Catherine Toll when they had the V123 course. I'm like, you know what? It was $150, I think. I'm like, this is a value at twice the price.
And it's a great course.
If they're doing it, I'm going to take that course,
Yeah.
and it made a huge difference for me in terms of my booking on Voice 123.
I did that with your recommendation, and I have a spiffy Voice 123 profile now. I haven't found quite the conversion into bookings that you have from that platform, but again, it's difficult. It depends on who you are, where you are,
Mhm.
what your accent is, how quick you get to the jobs, and a bunch of other things too. But the nice thing about voiceover is there are so many things you can try, and throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly, exactly. That is the beauty of our industry. It's kind of like being in a candy shop and deciding what you're gonna which candy you're gonna try today. But it's not easy to get there. I always want to make that caveat.
It's not.
It's not easy. Um, so before we wrap up, I always want to ask that question. If you were hanging out with an aspiring voice actor and you could give them one piece of advice in terms of getting started in the VO world, what would that piece of advice be?
It's interesting. I mean, I get asked this from time to time, and I listen to what some of your other guests had said about this, and I agree with all of them. Go for the stuff that interests you. Don't let yourself be pigeonholed by other people. But my little piece of advice is just a little one, but it's one that I wish somebody had. Well, nobody would have told me because it didn't really exist then. But I wish I'd thought of it sooner. And it's a small thing, but I think it's an important thing, which is when you start and you start sending out your reels and your clips to voice directories, production companies, agencies, and whatever, keep a list. Keep a list of everybody you've ever sent things to. Keep a list of every website you've ever uploaded your show reels to, because 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to sound completely different, and you're going to want to update them and make sure everybody's got the most recent copy. I am pretty sure that there are people out there still with copies of Mike Cooper Voice Reel 2008, and I wish I knew where they were. So, yeah, I think better record keeping going in would have done me well, and it would have enabled me to stay much better on top of the business of sending out clips and making sure everybody knew what I sounded like and where I was at in my development.
I love that.
It's a little one.
I don't know that I've ever had that one on before. Yeah, but I think it's unique because I don't think anybody's ever said that
Well,
before.
I hope it's useful to somebody.
Yeah, that's very valuable. And I'm in the process of producing my new commercial demo. It's almost done, and and I was working with my coach, and he said, I want you to take your old one and I want you to listen to it back to back because I want you to hear how better you've gotten. And this was done. I think my old one was at least 6 years old, and I listened to it, and especially back to back, realized how different it is. And
your
that's why
voice
it's important to
changes
update
as
that.
well. Your voice changes. I listen to stuff that I did 8-9 years ago, and it's a little bit up here, and my voice has dropped. And it's not good for that stuff to be out there if you can get it updated and replaced. Can I add a supplemental one? It's just a little one.
Of course.
If you're making a demo or you're having somebody make a demo for you, get the individual bits of the demo as separate files. Because then it gives you the option to reorder your reel, add new things into your reel and remix it later. And if you've got all of those stems, those individual clips, it's much, much easier to do that. And it's much better to do that up front than go back to the person who produced your reel 2 years ago and say, can you give me all the clips for that reel that we did back in whatever? It just gives you a bit more flexibility and might mean that you don't have to update your whole reel quite so quickly again.
And it allows you to put that into your VoiceSam demo player. And Bob Merkel and VoiceSam are a sponsor of this podcast. So your ability, the beauty of the VoiceSam is that they listen to those individual tracks. So getting those individual tracks makes it much easier for you to create your demo player rather than having to go into Twisted Wave and pull them out. So that's a really good piece of information as well.
You are
applicable.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you, sir. So before we go, where can people find you?
I'm pretty easy to find. I've been on the internet a while. So Instagram and Twitter, I'm just Mike Cooper. LinkedIn and Facebook, I'm Mike Cooper Voiceover, all one word. So come and check me out. The Instagram is all pictures of mountains, goats, horses, dogs, whatever. And then I put my audiobook stuff everywhere. So wherever you follow me, you'll be up to date on what I'm doing.
And website is Mike Cooper Voiceover as well.
That's right, MikeCooperVoiceover.com.
Beautiful. Check out his website. Check out his social media. You will not be disappointed. And not only are you an incredibly talented voice actor, you're also a great guy.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm happy to call you a friend.
Oh, me too.
And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I wish you continued success in your journey.
Cheers, Mike. Nice to talk.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Mike Lenz VO podcast. Head on over to MikeLenzVOpodcast.com for links and recaps of each show. Catch you next time on the Mike Lenz VO podcast.